Imagine for a moment that you are 40 feet underwater in pitch blackness. You are weighed down by a 60-pound helmet and a diving suit that feels like a coffin. You have run out of air. You signal for help, but the safety diver is too far away. Your lungs are burning. Panic isn't just an emotion. It's a physical command to bolt for the surface. But you can't, because if you rise too fast, the pressure change could kill you. This wasn't a nightmare. This was a Tuesday for actor Ed Harris. Hello cinema lovers and welcome back to Golden Flicker. I'm Gabe, stepping into the spotlight to narrate this one. Since it's my debut, your feedback means a lot. Drop a comment and let me know how I'm doing. There is a legend in Hollywood that says during one particular take on the set of The Abyss, Ed Harris almost drowned. He didn't just struggle, he ran out of air while the cameras were still rolling. When he finally got a regulator into his mouth and surfaced, choking and gasping, he didn't call for a towel. He reportedly walked over to the director, James Cameron, and punched him in the face. Whether the punch connected or was just a swing of desperate fury depends on who you ask, but the sentiment was real. This wasn't just a movie set, it was an endurance test. It was a production so grueling that the cast and crew didn't print t-shirts with the movie's logo. They printed shirts that said, "I survived the abyss." Welcome to the story of the most ambitious, dangerous, and technically revolutionary underwater film ever made. A film that broke technology, broke records, and very nearly broke the people who made it. Today we are submerging into the dark, cold waters of 1989 to explore James Cameron's The Abyss. Do you remember the first time you watched this film? Was it on a fuzzy VHS tape in the early 90s, squinting to see through the murky waters? Or did you catch the special edition years later and realize you had missed half the story? For many, The Abyss is that other James Cameron movie. It sits quietly between the action-heavy Aliens and the groundbreaking Terminator 2. But looking back, this film is arguably the most important pivot point in modern blockbuster history. It was the bridge between practical effects and the digital revolution. It was the moment Cameron decided that the ocean was his true muse. But the cost of this masterpiece was high. It was a production plagued by nervous breakdowns, divorces, chlorination burns, and a level of physical exhaustion that is illegal in most industries today. In this video, we aren't just looking at how they made the aliens glow, we are going to uncover why the cast refers to this movie as The Abuse. Building the impossible tank. To understand why this shoot was a nightmare, you have to understand James Cameron's obsession. In 1989, if you wanted to film an underwater scene, you usually did it dry for wet. You put actors on a smoky stage, blew fans on their hair to simulate floating, and added bubbles in post-production. It's safe, it's cheap, and to Cameron, it looked fake. He wanted reality. He wanted the exhaustion on the actors' faces to be genuine. So, he decided to film underwater. But he couldn't film in the open ocean. The weather, the currents, and the lighting would be uncontrollable. He needed a studio. But no studio tank on Earth was big enough for what he had in mind. So, the production team did something insane. They went to Gaffney, South Carolina, and found an abandoned nuclear power plant that had never been completed. They took the primary containment vessel, a massive concrete structure designed to hold a nuclear reactor, and sealed it up. They filled it with 7.5 million gallons of water. It was 55 feet deep and 209 feet across. This became a tank, the largest freshwater filtered tank in the world. They also utilized a smaller turbine pit, filling it with another 2.5 million gallons for the interiors of the rig. Just filling the tank took 5 days. But here is the kicker. The water was freezing cold, and the filtration system couldn't keep up with the amount of light pouring in from the sun. Algae started to bloom. The water turned murky. To fix this, they had to dump tremendous amounts of chlorine into the water, so much that it burned the skin of the divers and bleached the actors' hair white. When the chlorine didn't stop the light, They covered the surface of the water with millions of black plastic beads and a giant tarp to simulate the eternal darkness of the deep ocean floor. For 6 months, the cast and crew lived like moles. They would dive into the dark water at the start of the day and often not surface for hours. It was a claustrophobic, wet, cold, and chemically harsh environment. They weren't acting like they were trapped in a tin can at the bottom of the sea. They effectively were. The casting what-ifs. Before we dive deeper into the on-set trauma, let's play a quick game of what-if. The chemistry between Ed Harris, Bud Brigman, and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Lindsay Brigman, is the beating heart of this film. They play an estranged couple who hate each other but love each other, and their bickering feels incredibly sharp, but Bud Brigman was almost played by Harrison Ford. Can you imagine Indiana Jones in a diving suit? Ford was Cameron's top choice, but even back then, Ford had a nose for trouble and passed on the project. Perhaps he sensed the misery that was coming. Mel Gibson was also seriously considered, as was Dennis Quaid. Eventually, Cameron chose Ed Harris because he had a certain intensity, a blue-collar toughness, that made him believable as a deep-sea oil driller. For the role of Lindsay, the studio wanted a star. Jessica Lange was on the list. Jamie Lee Curtis was considered. Sigourney Weaver, who had just worked with Cameron on Aliens, was a possibility, but both she and Cameron agreed that it would be too similar to her role as Ripley. Ultimately, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio got the part. She was known for Scarface and The Color of Money. She was a serious, method-style actress. She had no idea that she was signing up for a role that would physically and emotionally break her. She later said in interviews that The Abyss was a lot of things, but fun was not one of them. The abuse and the divorce. The shoot was scheduled for a rigorous 60 days. It lasted 140 days. The crew began calling the film The Abuse, Son of Abyss, and Life's Abyss and Then You Dive. The pressure came from the top down. James Cameron is a known perfectionist, but on this set, he was a man possessed. He was diving along with the actors, holding the camera, directing underwater, using a PA system that lowered into the tank. He was working such long hours that he admitted to falling asleep mid-meal. He would wake up with a plate of food on his chest and a fork still in his hand, only to get up and go back to the tank. But there was a deeper layer of tension on set that mirrored the script perfectly. In the movie, Bud and Lindsay are a married couple in the middle of a messy divorce. In real life, James Cameron was married to the film's producer, Gallen Hard. During the stress of this never-ending production, their marriage collapsed. They separated shortly after filming wrapped. Think about that dynamic. The director and the producer are breaking up, while filming a movie about a husband and wife breaking up, in a high-pressure environment where everyone is exhausted and scared. The tension you see on screen between Bud and Lindsay, that wasn't just acting, that was the atmosphere of the entire production seeping into the celluloid. The actors were pushed to their absolute limits. Because of the depth of the tank, they had to undergo decompression every time they surfaced. This meant they couldn't just pop up for a coffee break. They had to hang on safety ledges underwater, breathing from regulators, waiting for their blood nitrogen levels to normalize. They spent more time underwater than professional salvage divers.
If you are enjoying this deep dive into cinema history, illuminate our day by clicking like and subscribing to Golden Flicker. We are on a mission to uncover the stories behind the greatest films ever made, and we need you on our crew. And I have a question for you. Which disaster production movie is your favorite? Is it The Abyss, Waterworld, Apocalypse Now? Let us know in the comments below.
The tech revolution. Before we get to the emotional climax, we have to talk about the water tentacle. When The Abyss was released in 1989, computer-generated imagery, CGI, was basically non-existent in live-action films. We had seen simple shapes in Tron, but nothing that looked real. Cameron wrote a scene where a tentacle made entirely of seawater rises from the moon pool, snakes through the air and mimics the faces of the crew. To achieve this, he turned to Industrial Light and Magic, ILM. The team, led by visual effects legend Dennis Muren, was terrified. They had to figure out how to make computer graphics refract light like water, reflect the environment and move organically. They spent 6 months working on 75 seconds of footage. They had to photograph the set from every angle to create reflection maps. They had to scan Ed Harris and Mastrantonio faces with lasers to create the digital masks. When the finished shot was projected on screen, audiences were stunned. It looked impossible. It was the first soft-surface photorealistic CGI character in cinema history. Without this water pseudopod, there is no T-1000 in Terminator 2. There are no dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. And there is certainly no Avatar. This seemingly small moment in the abyss was the big bang for modern visual effects. But while the computer graphics were seamless, the human element was cracking at the seams. And now, the golden flicker moment, the resuscitation. We have arrived at the heart of the movie, the scene that defines the golden flicker standard of intense, unforgettable cinema, the resuscitation scene. In the climax of the second act, Lindsay's mini-sub is flooded. With only one diving suit between them, she makes the impossible choice. She chooses to drown. She lets the freezing water fill her lungs, betting that the cold will preserve her brain function long enough for Bud to swim her back to the rig and revive her. It is a terrifying concept, but the filming of her resuscitation was a horror story of its own. The scene required Ed Harris to scream, cry, slap, and pound on Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio's chest as she lay dead on the cold metal floor. It is a scene of raw, animalistic grief. Bud refuses to let her go. He screams, "Fight! Fight! You never backed away from anything in your life." Cameron wanted it to be visceral. He shot take after take. Mastrantonio was soaking wet, shivering, lying on a hard grate with her shirt torn open while Ed Harris slapped her face and pumped her chest repeatedly. And then the camera ran out of film. Cameron, in his pursuit of perfection, demanded they reload and go again, and again, and again. According to set reports, after hours of this, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio cracked. When Cameron called for yet another take because of a technical glitch, she allegedly stood up, screamed, "We are not animals," and stormed off the set. She drove away and didn't come back for hours. Some accounts say that for the final close-ups of Ed Harris screaming, he was acting to an empty floor or a sandbag because Mastrantonio refused to lie down there one more time. Look at that scene again today. The desperation in Ed Harris's voice isn't just Bud crying for Lindsay. It is a man at the end of his rope, channeling all the frustration, exhaustion, and trauma of the last 6 months into a single plea for life. It is widely considered one of the best pieces of acting in Ed Harris's career, but the cost was so high that he refuses to discuss it. Do you agree that this raw intensity makes this the golden flicker moment of the film? The line between acting and reality didn't just blur, it dissolved completely. The ending that was lost. When the film finally wrapped and Cameron emerged from his underwater bunker, he had a massive epic on his hands, but the studio got nervous. The film was too long, the ending was too weird. In the original theatrical release, 1989, the ending feels abrupt. Bud meets the aliens, they save him, they rise to the surface, everyone hugs, credits roll. It was a nice sci-fi adventure, but it felt like something was missing. That's because something huge was missing. Cameron had filmed a global stakes ending. In his original vision, the NTIs, non-terrestrial intelligences, weren't just watching us, they were judging us. They were disturbed by humanity's obsession with war and nuclear weapons. The aliens trigger massive tidal waves, Megatsunamis, that threaten to wipe out every coastal city on Earth. New York, San Francisco, Tokyo, giant walls of water hover over them, ready to crash down. The aliens stop the waves only when they see Bud's sacrifice, his willingness to die for Lindsay. They see that humanity has the capacity for love, not just hate. The studio forced Cameron to cut this. They thought the nuclear message was too heavy-handed and the running time was too long. But without it, the movie loses its grand context. It becomes a story about a rig rather than a story about humanity. Years later, in 1993, the special edition was released. It restored 28 minutes of footage, including the tidal wave ending. The reception was transformative. Critics who had been lukewarm on the film suddenly hailed it as a masterpiece. It is one of the few examples in cinema history where the director's cut is not just better, but essential to understanding the movie. The Abyss hit theaters in August 1989. It faced stiff competition and didn't become the box office juggernaut the studio hoped for. It made money, but it wasn't Star Wars. However, its legacy is undeniable. First, it proved that CGI water creatures were possible, leading directly to the liquid metal of Terminator 2 just 2 years later. Second, it solidified James Cameron's reputation as a director who could manage massive logistical nightmares, skills he would need to film Titanic. And third, it remains a cult classic for anyone who loves hard sci-fi. But perhaps the most lasting legacy is the silence of its cast. To this day, Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio rarely speak about the film. When they do, it is with a distant look in their eyes. They survived the abyss, but they left a piece of themselves in that chlorinated water in South Carolina. This film stands as a monument to practical filmmaking. There were no green screens for the underwater scenes. When you see fear in their eyes as the water rises, it's because the water was really rising. It is a type of filmmaking that we will likely never see again. Too dangerous, too expensive, too uncontrollable. It is a flawless, beautiful, terrifying diamond, forged under extreme pressure. What is worth saving? The Abyss asks us a simple question. When you are in the deepest, darkest place imaginable, what is worth saving? For Bud, it was Lindsay. For James Cameron, it was his vision, no matter the cost. Thank you for diving with us today. If you discovered something new about this underwater epic, please click that like button. It helps us surface to more viewers. And make sure to subscribe to Golden Flicker so you never miss a story from the annals of cinema history. We want to hear from you. Do you prefer the theatrical cut or the special edition? And do you think the suffering of the actors was worth the final product? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, keep the flicker alive.